back to another episode of Two Tired Teachers. I'm Vinay.
And I'm Rumi.
And we are back. We're actually taping this over our Christmas break. Yay.
Yeah.
So that means that this year is halfway over. You can do it.
Notice you said over.
Mm-hmm.
Not
Over.
through. Over.
That's the operative word, over.
Mm-hmm.
I hope everybody is getting some well-deserved me time. We've talked about that before. Self-care is important. So I hope that you have been doing like me, spending this time eating.
Sleeping.
And eating.
A lot of Hulu, Netflix, Prime Video.
Probably too much eating, but nevertheless. It's been great. It's been great. It's been great. It's been great. We'll get better. We'll get better next week. Next week. All right. So today we wanted to talk about another one of our interesting conversations that we have off mic, as they say, often. And I'm sure, and you know, if you've been teaching, as they say, for more than 5 minutes, you've probably had this conversation too. So we want to talk about, and we would love some input from you all. So as you're looking at this or after you look at this, talk to some of your colleagues and give us some feedback as to how you feel about this topic. And it is, how do teachers really feel about the state of education? If we're to be honest with ourselves,
That one.
yeah,
Okay.
if we're to be honest with ourselves, how do we, especially those of you who have been in it for a while, I guess any teacher, if you've been in 5 minutes or 5 years or 50 years, I hope nobody watching has been in 50 years. Seriously.
You retired.
All right. Okay, even if you're retired, what do you think about the state of education as it stands today from a teacher perspective? So we often talk about this, and I know that this can be debated and argued and dissected to infinity and beyond. We all have our various opinions about it.
We do.
So that's what we want to talk about today. How do we feel about where education is going? What some of the things we have to deal with right now as current classroom teachers, and where do we see it going in the future? I often say to people that I feel like education has lost the main thing. We no longer have the main thing as the main thing in education. I say it all the time. She can tell you. That is one of the things I say all the time. And what I mean by that is, I feel like most of the things that we have to do today in education are really not about educating.
Mm-hmm.
It's really about a plethora of other things that, at the end of the day, don't amount to a hill of beans, as the old people used to say, of which I am now. Don't amount to a hill of beans when it comes to actually educating our students. That's my take on it. Jump in anytime.
What she said right there. I mean, nothing to do with education anymore. What used to be we're educating people has become we need to get the scores.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what more to say about that. I have kind of a different take of it and different view of it, because I have been in completely different settings, educational settings around the world. And what is happening right now in our system, it just is so alien to me, so mind-blowing, and I do have the problem of understanding. And I know the whys, or at least I pretend to know the whys, because my nose is all over the politics of education and everything. But what I don't understand, and this has been me telling Vinay all the time, is why a teacher's quiet.
Yeah.
That has been my own, and why are teachers quiet about it? Starting out what we do at school now, then going through how we do it, passing through the very interesting thing that I have been following lately, especially in our state, with our health insurance and with our insurance for what they call disaster situations. And I'm literally one of those people that sit there and I'm like, why are teachers allowing that to happen to them? And I want to say that straightforward. And it's not the first time that you're going to hear me saying it. I have been around, life has taken me around. I have not seen anywhere in this world more hardworking and more dedicated teachers as in the United States. And in the same time, I have not seen anywhere around the world teachers that have been so much put down and stepped on as in the United States. Sorry there, I said it.
Okay, so as you can see, she's coming from a whole another side of the coin than I'm coming from, because she's been on other sides of the world that I haven't been on, and she's been able to teach in those other places. And so she has a 100% different perspective than I do. So I can only speak for what I have seen in the United States as far as when I first started in public education up until now. So from 1983 up until now, and I'm speaking specifically about what I see in the classroom, not so much as to what's happening to teachers per se. I'm speaking about education, the way that we educate our students. That's basically the point of view that I'm coming from. So from when I started in 1983, back in the olden days, when teachers basically, you were given a set of texts, you were given a set of teachers' editions, and then you were just sent into the room, and there was not a lot of conversation about standards. They were there, but there was not a lot of conversation about it. It was basically, you're teaching fifth grade, this is what they're supposed to know by the time they end fifth grade, make it happen. And so you as the teacher took those TEs and you took your set of textbooks, and then you went in and you created your curriculum. You created the way that you wanted to dispense this material so that the students would get the best experience possible for the materials that you had. And to me, that was the better way of teaching, because I was able to, with my own personality, figure out what works for me, and then figure out what works for the students that I happen to have for that year. And then I would create their learning around that. We had autonomy, and we were able to pull in, whatever resources that we felt like were necessary to reach our students. I think that the students enjoyed it. By the end of the year, hopefully everybody knew what they needed to do, and we did it again the next year. And as time went on, the system became more and more scripted, and I'm using scripted as a giant term, as in they begin to tell us, this is what you can do, this is what you can't do, this is what you have to say, this is what you can't say, this is what they have to learn, and this is what we don't necessarily need them to learn. And to me, it became more of a, like she said earlier, about tests. So as the years progressed, it became more about tests and less about getting them the information and making them thinkers, problem solvers, able to go out into the real world. If you talk to students today, I have nieces and nephews that are college age. You talk to them, they often say that when they came out of high school, they didn't feel like, one, they were prepared for college, even though they went to college. They weren't prepared for college because they didn't learn how to be prepared for college in high school. And two, they're not prepared for the real world. So we're no longer teaching them how to be prepared for the real world. I can remember in my first fifth grade classroom, we spent half of the day with actual curriculum, and then half of the day we changed our class and we did something back then in the city that I was in called mini society, where we had a whole society. They had their own money. The students ran businesses. They had to run for offices. They had to interview for jobs. Our principal was on board. We did it was a whole town. They had goods and services. We had a day where we distributed our money system around the school, and the people from the other students from the school were able to come in and shop these goods and services that my students prepared, because I was getting them in the mindset of, this is how the real world works. This is how businesses work. This is how you get a job. They had to fill out applications. They had to go to the principal and be interviewed. They had to do all of these things to prepare them for the real world. And I felt like at that time, even though I won't say that I was an expert at it, I really think it gave them some good school skills going forward.
Yep.
It made them be able to problem solve, because they had to, I got to pay my employees. I got to see if I make a profit. I have to, I got to do my debts. I got to get licenses for businesses. It ran the whole gambit of a real society, real world experience for them. And I thought it was the coolest thing ever. I felt like then I was really giving them some skills that they could use for the rest of their life and go out and be productive citizens. Whereas today, most of our emphasis is put on, can you pass this state test? And pass that, no worries. So we have students who are leaving high schools with the ability to pass a test, but they have no ability how to walk out into the real world and withstand the pressures of the real world. And to me, that's where we've taken the main thing away from the main thing. That's one of the things that has happened, that has taken the main thing away from the main thing. What can we do about it? Teacher voice is important. So I feel like, when they're making all of these decisions, and of course that comes from the top down, ask us. Ask us. That's all I'm saying. Ask us.
Yeah, but the reality is that they're not going to, so we will have to have our own voices up. And it looks to me, and let me say that straightforward, I have been in the same situation we're straightforward afraid of.
Yeah.
I know it sounds, very terrific and whatever, but terrifying, but we are afraid of. And then the other thing that happens is even if we speak out, the reality of the situation is we're not taking into account. I don't know why, because literally we're the specialists of whatever we're doing in the classroom. But the reality is, until parents are involved and the parent voice comes up, big changes are not going to happen easy. They're not going to happen easy. Now, interestingly enough, for me, I did not came to this, like when I have this history of this is how it was in the 80s. It's my 9 going for the 10 years in the United States. So in my case, I already came to that established system. But even for me, specifically in the last 3 years, has been more and more and more restrictive. And once we hit the talk of data, everything changed. So now we have attached to teachers' evaluation the results of the kids of one test one day of the year. Those are big talks. It's like, really, how is that even possible? But it's there. Reality that it's there. Then we kind of managed to figure out how to teach specific way of skills so the kids will pass the test. We're not stupid people. We know what we're doing. But the idea was, okay, they will know what to do, but the other time that I have free, then I'll teach whatever I need to teach for these kids and the way that it fits me as a personality, as a teacher, as a whatever it is, so I can reach my students. So they can have an experience of a real life, because right now real life, it's a picture or video that we're presenting, which is not real life. But then it was more and more, no, you have to say this, you have to do that. You are confined to a specific way of teaching of how you don't have to. And I don't understand it. And I have been, specifically this year, kind of struggling with, because I'm confined to it. Mm-hmm. It's like, you don't believe that I can do, or you don't believe that I can teach. And I was talking to a friend of mine 2 or 3 days ago about it. And I'm like, oh, I don't understand why. And then she kind of laughed at me, like, you know why it is. And I'm like, no, I can't figure out. Yes, you do. It's because of so many teachers are leaving early. And the ones that are coming are really not prepared for it. So all of the scripted lesson plans to help those teachers, because it's a profession where the moving parts are beyond any other profession.
And so in some of the readings that I've been doing over the past couple of days, one of the other issues with education, 2 things that you have spoken about. One is lack of parent accountability. Mm-hmm. So that's a hard one.
It's a hard one.
That's a hard one. Mm-hmm. And it's going to take, I don't know what it's going to take to do anything about that, because at the end of the day, we can't control parents. Mm-hmm. You know, we don't have control over that. We don't have control over the situations that the children come from. I'll put it like that.
Yeah.
We don't have control of that. So if this child was born to parents who couldn't care less about education, it is what it is. If this child was born from parents like my parents were, who were working parents, a single mother working every day who didn't come to the school. Mm-hmm. She didn't come to things at the school unless it was an absolute necessity. I can speak for sure and tell you that I can remember through my whole K through 12th grade schooling, my mother came once in the 5th grade and once in the 10th grade. That was it in graduation. Mm-hmm. It's because she worked. So she was not able to come. So we have to deal with all those situations. And yes, we know that most parents, and I'll say the parents of students in our struggling schools, most of them, because they're working parents, it's not that they don't care, it is that they cannot. Yes. They do not have time. Yes. They may not have transportation, or, you know, their schedule just doesn't work with our schedule. Mm-hmm. To be involved in that way. And that's something we have to figure out how to work around. So that is one issue that causes a huge thing about education, that, you know, some of that we can do some things about. We have to figure out better ways to work with those parents. All right. Mm-hmm. We have to almost make it convenient for them if we really want them to be involved. One thing that my former partner and I, language arts partner and I, used to do for our parents, that we know we've gone to jobs, we have met them at restaurants, and we just went to their house. You know, we can do phone conferences, but sometimes it's good to see a person face to face. We would just go to their house. What's a good time for us to come to your house? We'll come after work. So we've gone to people's houses as late as 7, 8, 9 o'clock, so that we can have that face to face with them. And they were much appreciative because it worked for them. Mm-hmm. So sometimes, you know, it's a matter of get a relationship with that parent. What can I do to help you out? So forth and so on. So that's one of those things that everybody's got to be a willing participant in that, because the students don't really have a choice in their parentals. Period. They don't have a choice in that. The other thing that just went out of my head, that's that oldness. That's old timers jumping in. That you talked about. Highly qualified teachers. That was another one of the things that was that I read about over the course of a couple of days about that's causing issues in public education. Yes. Is highly qualified teachers. And unfortunately, according to the data, highly qualified teachers either, one, through attrition, however you say the word, they retire out, they move on. Two, they are put in the higher economic schools. And so, disclaimer, not saying that all teachers in the lower socioeconomic or lower performing schools have all teachers that are not highly qualified, but that is where they tend to put those teachers, because if a school is a difficult school, most of, I'll say, highly qualified teachers don't want to go there, because you don't want to have to deal with all the other stuff that goes with being in a low performing school. And that is the reality of education. So, in my opinion, all teachers should be highly qualified. I don't care what school you work in. Mm-hmm. You should be highly qualified, period. Now, we know if you're just coming out of college, you can't be highly qualified at that point.
It takes
time. So we get that. Yeah, it takes time to get there. But at the end of the day, when you look at all of the teachers in the building, everybody should be highly qualified for what they're doing. The reality is, yes, we are still in a teacher shortage. So because we're in a teacher shortage, and I know people don't understand that, because we're in a teacher shortage, then people end up being put in positions that they're not necessarily qualified for. And it's simply because there needs to be a body in that position. Because of the teacher shortage. And what causes teacher shortage is, one, who wants to go into this profession because they already know what they're walking in the door to. So a lot of people that could be very overly and very qualified for this profession, they don't want to go into it because monetarily is not worth it. No. And health-wise is not worth it. And they can go somewhere else and get a much better package. That's number one. It's not worth it to them. Two, people are just doing other things because a lot of people are no longer seeing the benefit of being in this profession, unfortunately.
No, that's the whole thing when I said coming into the United States and seeing it. That's what it is, the biggest, it was kind of a cultural shock for me when the way that teachers are perceived, that big saying of if you don't know how to do, you teach, something like this. This is a complete, I'm not going to use the word, but you cannot be like this. The paradigm right now is that teachers are not good.
Yeah.
And this is the whole narrative has been spilled out. Whatever you want to think about it, political things, interest in economic things as a charter schools and private schools and whatever you want to, that's the narrative right now. And it's very, very obvious when you kind of drop in the system and when you have been in other educational settings and systems where the teacher is probably the most important person that you communicate while the kid is there, because parents view it like this. I have been in two educational systems, I'm going to say what, that they have a completely different approach to that. One is 99.8% of parents are involved, and parents think that they're the first responsible for the child's education. And the teacher is the one that comes after them, because If they don't know what to do, there is that person that knows more than them. Imagine the kind of respect that these parents have. The other system was in a country that were trying to completely destroy the paradigm that they had as a socio-economical and build again. Well, they did it, but here was the click. Parents are not allowed to school. Parents, you're not coming, you're not complaining, you're not doing anything, you're not asking questions. And surprise, surprise, one of the big economical systems right now in the world. Zero immigration, we all want to go there, okay? I'm talking about Singapore. But they started with, we are going to educate everybody, but because they knew that the parents didn't have that background education, they completely closed the schools for the parents. But in both situations, you have the biggest thing is admiration for the teacher and putting the teacher on top of everything. You know, teachers here and everything else is there because the teacher will be the one to teach every single other profession that they are looking at. So, I mean, I understand that our situation is not the same. And majority of us, we live because of that. I do have another list of things that I'm going to mention. And I'm not saying, or I'm not preaching here about we have to change the paradigm. I don't think that is going to be so easy and so fast. But there are specific things that can be done, even on a local stage, you know, and it doesn't have to deal with what's going on outside of the schools. And I want to jump off something that Vinay said with the highly qualified teachers that everybody's looking to go in the good schools, which is true. I'm not going to deny it. But it's because when we go to work to the Title I schools, the rough schools, there's no backing up of what we're doing or how we're doing it. And that becomes a complete struggle. I want to help, I want to do that. And obviously we have to face a lot of other things around us, like behavior problems, like simply hungry kids. Like kids that nobody else is paying attention. And you want to try, but there's constrictions of what to do and how to do it because, God forbid, somebody complains. So, am I going too deep in it?
But go ahead.
Oh no, just to stop. No, I'm just saying that I think that in some point we have to realize that you build teachers at the personality of a teacher, not to fit a box in a scripted situation, a box of restrictions. And until that changes, I don't see how we're going to get out of the way we are going.
And I think part of the conversation that needs to be had, and while she was talking, I was just writing down some things basically that she just said. Some other issues that we find in education are going back to why we have teacher shortages. It's not because there are not people that are in college right now wanting to be teachers. We have those, but funding and budgets. You know, every school, every district, every school has their own funding, has their own budgets. They know where they want to allocate their money. So if I want to allocate my money more for resources and those resources be tangible things rather than a person, a building principal has every right to do that. So sometimes we end up with bigger classes, less teachers, and more of this rather than smaller classes, more teachers, and less of this. So budget and funding have a lot to do with why we have the so-called teacher shortage also. Another thing that she touched on that has a big role or a big part in how we educate our students has to do with mental health, trauma, behavior. Yes. This is the world that we live in. Most of us work in situations where we're dealing with students And teachers as well. Let me not leave us out, because some of us grew up in some of these very same situations where we're dealing with our own trauma, they're dealing with trauma, and you're bringing in 25 to 30 little people that have had traumatic experiences and have had no way to deal with them, so they deal with them in a group setting. Behavior, trauma, and mental health. This society, this day and age, that is something that we have to deal with even in the school. So we have to figure out a way to marry that all together. Another thing is technology. Do we or don't we? How much is enough? What do we do with it when we get it? We can't just keep throwing money at the bigger, newer, brightest, sparkly toy and think that's going to fix education, because it isn't.
It's not going.
It's not one of those things. And I think the greatest conversation we have to have is, what does it mean to educate a student? You know, take out how much money I get paid, how much money she gets paid, take out my medical insurance, take that all out of the conversation, and let's have a conversation about, what does it mean to educate a student, a child? What does that mean? What does that look like? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? What is the end game? Is the end game in educating a student, getting them to pass a state test, so that we can say we were in the 95 to 99 percentile of passing this state test, and this is how great we are as a state or as a district or as a school, because we got all of these children to pass this test? Or is the end game, this person can get a diploma, go to college, be successful, they can read, they can write a sentence, they can speak properly, they can engage in conversation, they can go out into this world and become a useful, and I guess useful is probably a bad word, but they can be a productive citizen and move about this world and be successful, whatever success is in their eyes. We really have to have that conversation. What is this whole education thing about? To me, that's where we've lost the main thing, because we've made this whole education game about something else. We've made it about something else. If my niece and nephew can sit and look me straight in the eye and say, high school did me no good. It did not prepare me for college, and I actually found some articles that I will put in the description box that you can read on your own, where they talk to specific students and ask them, what is it that you need? And that's what they were saying. School does not teach me how to be prepared for this world. It's not teaching me how to go to college. They're not getting those things. So it doesn't matter about all the, do we throw a tablet at them, or do we give everybody, what are they prepared to walk out into the world and get a job or create a job?
Oh, and I'll jump on that one immediately. Forget just how it looks like, but then we have to think of what we're teaching and when we're teaching it. Because as of right now, if you ask me, we teach a lot of stuff that kids are really not prepared mentally for those things, or they don't have any kind of experience in life to build on. And things that probably 5 years are going to be completely unnecessary. It happened to us when we were teaching personal finance with the checks. It's obsolete for us already. Imagine what it's going to be in 10 more years.
So that's exactly my point as to why we have to talk about, what does it mean to educate a student and what's the end game. When they get to the end, which, it may be college, or it may be a trade school, or it may be walking out of high school and starting their own thing. Whichever way they choose to go, at the end of the day, what is it that we should be doing that contributes to them being able to do that successfully, is my point. Everything else aside, what is the end game? And until we really sit down and have that conversation and figure out what the end game is, All this other stuff that we talk about, yes, is important, but it becomes futile.
But no, if you ask me right now, the way that you are talking about, and I'm listening to you, but well, right now the end game is profit for some company that makes the tests.
Well, yeah, that's
But,
not.
so
I wasn't going to say that. I was going to throw that out there because
No,
we know that everybody is aware of that. Yes,
Yeah,
that's
so-
the point right there. And so that's why the main thing is no longer the
Yeah.
main thing. So what do we do about that? That's the question.
But okay, but in this case, I'm back to the situation. We need to speak up, but parents need to start speaking
Okay,
up.
but I'm going to take the parents out of the equation because we're right there on the front line. So how can we remove the fear of the majority of teachers so that we speak up? Because we sit in the classrooms every day and complain about one more thing we have to do that doesn't make sense in the whole scheme of things.
Yes.
So rather than, and I think we had this conversation when we were talking about teacher burnout, because that's part of it.
Yes, it is. Big one.
What is it that we do as a whole? Because it may not necessarily mean that we all have to walk out and go on strike. Because some of us are in states like we are right now where we can't strike.
Even if you walk out,
because we're not a strike state, so we can't legally
do
do that anyway. So what are some other things that we can do? How do we apply the pressure? What do we do to get these things changed? Because we are well aware everybody can't run for office. Every teacher in the country can't run for an office. We clearly are teachers, so we can't go get a job with our state board of education or anything like that because we're in the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
But what is it that we can do that will apply pressure to the powers to be to get them to bring us to the table to have that conversation? That most of these things that you're passing down for us to do, it's not helping the student in the person that we're educating in the long run. It's not helping them. You're giving us one more mandate that we have to squeeze into an 8-hour day, so to speak.
Yes.
That's not helping any situation. And then I think you said something earlier about the education gap. It's certainly not closing the education gap.
Oh, no.
It's certainly not.
No, at all. No.
So that's the conversation that I'm interested in knowing. What do we do to influence that conversation? Because we can sit in our homes and at brunch and at lunch or at the bar or wherever and hash this out between ourselves now until the end of the world. But what can we do to actually put some force behind the powers that be? And I think that's the conversation. That's what I'm interested in. I don't have the answer to that. I don't know how we do that as a conglomerate, not just as a few people here and a few people there and a few people there, because it's more than a few people that are upset about this. Now, let me just say this so that this doesn't come across that, we're just bitter teachers and da-da-da-da.
Oh.
We work our tails off. And most of us, even though we're having that conversation about how much this sucks, we work our tails off to make sure that we can give them the best experience that we can give them in the parameters that we have. There are some amazing teachers out there. I consider myself to be somewhere in that spectrum. Yes. There are some amazing teachers. We watch them on videos. We listen to their podcasts. We read their books. We go to their conferences. We do all of those things. So we know that they're out there. But we shouldn't have to work this hard. They shouldn't have to work that hard. What do we do to make this better? Because those amazing teachers that are all across this country, splattered all everywhere, they don't get to touch every single student that comes through education. And that's the sad part to me. I think you're an amazing teacher, but every 5th grade kid in the world is not going to get to experience your amazingness. So what do we do? Where do we go? All of us should be able to be amazing in our own way. That's about how I feel about it. So what do we do?
Can you see my face? And now you can understand why I call her sensei. Right there. Okay. I'm just saying, I'm just sitting here and I'm enjoying it like you don't have idea. Well, once again, there are ways for us to get on the train, and luckily enough, we can work together. My thing is, what I'm seeing is the constriction, okay? So probably it should start in a small scale, 2 or 3 teachers. What is to say that you and I cannot switch classrooms every other week, for example, for 1 day? So my kids will experience your teaching and your kids will experience my teaching.
But what's to say is the person that's in charge.
Thank you. So I was going there. So I was going there. You have to have, in my opinion, or at least what I have seen, you have to have the people on the top stop saying, no, you cannot do, box. There have to be people that somehow have a experience in the classroom, and they were willing to try with 2, 3, 4, 5 teachers. Because we do have examples in our district of a campuses that are working differently, and they're achieving it. But you have to have that person, in my opinion, on the top that knows what it is, knows how it is, have the experience in the classroom, and then be willing to say, okay, I'm not going to care where my school is going to be rated or how we're going to try to do that and involve everybody. I know it's different, but it happens. Okay.
That's all it was.
So, I mean, we have schools in our
I'm not disputing what you're saying.
Okay, so here's
the question still goes, we're still going around the same circle.
We're still going
at the
around
end
the
of
same
the day,
circle.
How do we get that conversation had on a giant scale? Yes, we have those principals that walk out of the box and say, I don't care what, we're going to do it this way because this is better for our students. But that's a minority.
It is a minority.
How do we get that to be the majority? So that's the question that I'm putting forward, and I don't have the answer to that. And I'm soliciting answers as to what do we do to get the powers that be to understand what we're doing right now is not working, and to continuously throw big bucks into things that are, 1, band-aids, or 2, completely not working, or 3, you change them every single year because somebody comes and says this is better. So before you even figure out, does this even work, we're on to the next big, bright, shiny toy. So what do we do to get the powers that be to understand it ain't working? So stop telling us it's not working, because we already know that we work in it. We work in it, so we already know that it's not working. And when we give us the opportunity to tell you, as professionals, what can be done to help this situation work. So I'm engaging. I'm asking. Please.
I'm in the same situation.
Give us your wisdom. Apparently, we don't have it.
No, I mean.
But I still feel like that's a conversation that needs to be had. What is it really that we feel education is supposed to be about? And until we can answer that honestly, we're going to have this debate forever. And so kudos to those schools that, whether they be private, public, whatever, that have chosen to step outside of the box and do it their own way, and they're getting the results, and they are, producing these amazing people coming out of these schools. Kudos to you. But how can we get that across the board? How can we get that across the board is my question. And so I don't have an answer. I'm just throwing it out there because it troubles me daily. Give us some feedback. How can we all work together to make this happen?
I'm with you on that one. There's a lot of ideas. There's a lot of things that we can look around. There are amazing examples going on. I was kind of a part of in a small scale, as a coach, but I do think that the big thing will be bringing those administrators at board that this is not working and we need something, because most of the amazing changes have happened coming from that kind of administrators coming up and saying this is not working, we need something else for our kids and for our situation, and then the community stands with them. Yeah. But what I said for you and me switching classes, we did that 2 years ago, I think, when we rotated the teachers. Okay, so the 5th grade teacher will go to 3rd grade, the 3rd grade to 4th, and now you have the whole vision of the vertical. Why I'm teaching here in 3rd grade this thing, and it's going to show up all the way to 5th grade, not immediately with me. Then at a level of coaches, we will be walking around that it's a small scale, but it can be done. But the one thing that I think was decisive in this thing, that at this point, the principal that I had came on board with it. Yeah. Probably not with everything, but he came on board with it. And he said, yes, I like that. The people that you're bringing here as a coaches, they're absolutely amazing people, and everybody will benefit. Sure enough, at the end, we benefit of it. But once again, I think, first, for me, and this is just my opinion, and take it as it comes, first of all, we need to start talking. Then on a small scale, showing that it's working, whatever we're doing, it's working. And probably we're going to get beatings at some point. I mean, not physical, you know what I'm saying. But if you don't show it's going to be like this, it's not going. Now, here's the other side, and I'm going to say it. Then you have to have a team of teachers ready to jump in, because you know perfectly well we're going to have the teachers that are comfortable in this situation where they are, and it's going to be a resistance, especially for a big change. Yeah. But once you have the team jumping in to show it's working, why not? So probably the example of how to, I don't know. My mind goes completely in a different way, and but I will be yes, I need help. Please send us some.
So as you can see, she has one example of something that could be done. There are trillions probably, and that's probably an exaggeration, of course, but there are many ways that it can be addressed. However, I still feel that a conversation has to be had to start any of those ways. Whichever ways you want or can that you choose, there has to be a conversation with everybody from the top all the way down to even and including students. Because
that's true.
They have a voice in this. They do have a voice in this. So the conversation has to be said. So we've rambled on with that. And like I said from the beginning, this is a debate that could go on to infinity and beyond. But I was just interested in getting some feedback from others as to where do you land in this debate? Where do you want to see education go? What do you think education should be about to start with? What should our end goal be? What are some of your ideas of how we can make this better? Because you can Google education right now and find information from one extreme to the next. And we can go on over days and days and days, and everybody can say something different, but at some point we're going to have to all come to one agreement as to what this is supposed to look like and how we're supposed to attain it. So rather than continue to go back and forth, and because we could probably, like I said, do it for another few hours, and we'll still be in the same boat that we're in before we start.
It's still going to be just the two of us.
Right. So give us some feedback. Let us know how you feel. And because we will be glad to hear from some of you. And with that being said, we're going to go ahead and sign off for the day. Again, hopefully you're enjoying your holiday break. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Because by the time you see us again, it will be into a new year. So Happy New Year. Get some rest. And let's go back on next week and go for the gusto. This is Vinay signing out.
This is Rumi. Bye.